Go. Okay. Have you got us both in frame?
Yes.
Okay. Just seems like it's over here more. Hello. You have to do a hello. Hello. What are you laughing at?
Just, oh, hey, we're live on stream. Let's see if we're in frame.
Better now.
Live on camera. Let's do a mic check.
Top-notch production. Well, we always do a mic check once we get going. Can you guys see and hear us?
Yeah. Are you guys able to see all three of us?
Can you see all three of us?
They're saying, hi, hey, nice hat, Tyler.
Oh, I see how it is.
Well, I'm the one who brought some style to this stream.
We can see and hear all three of you.
Good, good.
All right, let's get going. So, busy week again, despite a few of us getting knocked out, you and I included, with a cold. Several of us, I think, were trying to work through it last week. And by about, Friday, you and I were coughing and sneezing, and I think we both spent the last...
Had an awesome snot orgy. It was fantastic.
Yeah, the weekend for us was sleeping. If only we were together.
Tyler is the best cuddler. Not that I know personally, but I hear it on good account.
On Reddit. Okay. So let's get through
/r/Tyler Cuddles.
Let's get through a few things. Starting off, no planned testing this weekend. We had some IT testing earlier this week, and then we had another IT test yesterday. God,
the day that wasn't today.
Our days are very busy. Sometimes they get a little confusing. And that went well. We had some issues that we kind of want to get into some testing next week. We've got a lot of things landing or possibly landing next week, so we'll probably try and put together an updated build with some of those changes. Some of the cool things that we changed are listed in here. Some of those things are larger.
Oh, we talk about cool things in the list?
We do talk about cool things. Are you coming in?
I'm just coming in to say hi.
Well, we said all three of us were in frame.
Yeah.
Hi, really busy. When I'm wearing my headphones like a loser around my neck, gotta get back. Goodbye.
No judgment on any of you that wear your headphones around your necks like losers.
Oh. You're not. Yeah, he's gonna come back. Yeah. Here you go. You can't. Yeah, I started this stream off with, we've been busy. What happened yesterday? You're back.
Yeah, just for a few minutes. Yeah, spent most of the last few days, and then the weekend, and next week is going to be spent doing stuff like this, which is why I'm not here. And if this phone rings again, I will be out of here again.
So if you guys have any paperwork that needs done, Mark is just in the zone for doing paperwork right now.
Yeah, he loves paperwork.
Loves it.
Love it. So
Can't
much
get
fun.
enough of it.
Just as much I love, Roseanne Barr singing. And
he was going door to door in the office building like, hey, you got any paperwork you need me to do?
Yeah,
You guys have a black shirt theme going.
We do.
It's kind of a gamer thing, I think, in general.
And fatter, guys thing too. Yeah.
You look like ushers.
Okay.
Wait.
It's because we're so chaste.
Yeah. I know what that means. Yeah, then the answer's probably right.
Okay.
Moving on.
Moving on to what we're doing here.
We promise we make video games, you guys.
Yeah. So, okay.
Tyler makes video games.
Number 2, we're not going to
do.
We won't be doing any user stories this week.
You're the eye candy.
Oh, yeah, that's good. I thought that was his hat.
Would you guys like to sit together? Do you want me to get it?
No, Mark doesn't cuddle as good as you. We covered this.
On
it was
Reddit.
literally 5 minutes ago.
Okay. As I mentioned, several of us got the plague. Made it a little bit too hard to get.
Bye.
You're literally sitting with this. Okay.
Tell your immune system to get good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, back to that.
Video games, right?
Video games. Several of us were sick. I came in midweek. There was just a little bit too much to do this week, so we're pushing user stories out. Won't be doing them this week. We still have the top 10-ish.
It's been a really, really productive week, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's like 95%.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about here goes into the some of the stuff that we're doing for the next scenario. It will then color the deathmatch scenario. It will also color Beta 1. All of this stuff fulfills a lot of elements to improving the experience for Beta 1 and giving some fun gameplay in the meantime. And a lot of this, like Mark said last week, is way beyond what our initial spec for Beta 1 was, because we know that people have been very patient, so we've kind of upped our own ante there. We're not, it's gotten better, far more than I think what we initially had spec'd out for Beta 1. And part of that is thanks to the work that we're doing right now. So, let's get in.
I was trying to tell if anonymous rich creepy uncle is in bold and underlined or just underlined.
So don't, you're ruining the surprise. So thank you very much to one of our backers who wanted to be referred to as our anonymous rich creepy uncle, who sent both office pizza for lunch today. Thank you very much. I think I had, 5 slices? Speaking of that
fatty.
Yeah, I just kept eating it. It was so good. Usually we have lunch at 1, and they showed up at 12, and everything smelled so good. I was like, all right, lunch!
Tyler just took one whiff, and he was like, no, we're not waiting until lunch.
Yeah, let's just have this now.
Bucket food!
I envy your metabolism.
Well, so svelte?
I don't eat breakfast. And
that's not how metabolism works.
No, I'm saying instead of that, I don't think it's that. I just don't eat a lot. It just kind of happens every once in a while.
I had 2 pieces of pizza.
Okay, so why don't we go into this number 1? If you can give an example of what entity component templates is, like we did last week. Do you remember the example?
Well, they should have just watched the fucking show last week.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
All right, so the TLDR, in case you weren't here last week, slackers. Entity component templates is when we did rehabilitation, and even sort of part of our core system prior to that is we built a really cool entity component model for our server. If you don't know what that is, go research programming. It's really, really powerful, really, really flexible. There isn't a good way for our designers a la Ben and Mark to compose entities and say, like, this thing has a health bar and an entity. Or in the case of like
a plot, use the plot.
Well, the spawn points for like the scenarios. We'd like to have an entity that like spawns guard to protects it, and spawns a plot so that you've got walls around you, and does all these different things. Possibly controls some of the rules for the scenario, and we can sort of compose entities that do this. But Ben and Mark and the designers and Tyler, who works in the terrain editor too, like haven't really been empowered to take advantage of this really cool system we've got. So there's been a big push to get this into their hands so that they can start doing really cool shit with it. So it's actually, I don't know how long we've been going on it now, but it's
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Bull was pretty much the only guy on it for a while.
Yeah.
With a lot
like
of,
we started with
oversight.
the editor side of it so that we could like get Ben's side of it right first, and now we're actually plumbing it through to talk to our server. So I'm going to read the words that we've got here, but that's sort of the primer on why entity component templates matters. Is it's going to empower Ben, mostly Ben, but any other designer that works in the editor to build really cool gameplay elements into the editor that aren't just like, I want a tree here and a rock there. And
yeah, so last week's live stream, Ben went over, he did a rough pass of kind of a scenario design, and it was very much like our capture point stuff that we did before, but it requires a lot more kind of things coming together, NPCs, plots, building destruction, capture mechanics, and the simple version of this is I can go into the editor, or Ben can go into the editor, place a plot and say, okay, when that plot is attacked, do this. When that plot is taken, do this. And each one of those do this are basically entities that have to be actually created. So once they're actually created, then they can be, copied and pasted and moved around with settings configured on them, configurable in the editor and configured on them.
Like from your perspective, from you guys' perspective, a lot of this is like the stuff that you take for granted when it comes to playing games. But for us, it's really, really cool sauce for making games.
Right. That's a good way of putting it.
We're really excited to get these tools into the guys creating content so that they can do really cool shit with it. For you, it's going to be like, oh, hey, we've got a new scenario, yay!
Yeah.
You know, which is going to be awesome. But you know,
new mechanics, easier to make.
Yeah.
It makes all of this moving forward faster for us to do.
It's super crazy exciting for us. For you guys, it's only mostly exciting. What?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
it's super amazing,
There you
exciting
go,
for you.
super
and if you're
amazing.
not super excited, you're
You're
wrong.
Okay, teamwork.
Permissions update. So Christina's been quietly working on our permissions tech, which would make it easier to use multiple gameplay systems, currently affecting items and plots. We'll also be able to support more types of permissions, such as granting permissions to your realm to build on your plot, but not to dismantle it. Plots can now be granted permission settings based on scenarios as well, something specifically needed for the next scenario. She's also working on remote plot functions, such as the ability to release a plot without being near it and adding more flexibility to control the number of plots a player can own. Some of these changes are waiting on UI updates to allow the players to make use of them.
Yeah, that was a big one because Christina's been on it for a while.
So a lot of this, we sort of had a hodgepodge of permission systems, especially for like plots early on, where we had this very simple like who can interact with my plot setting that was just very much like all or nothing for like me, my group, my guild, my faction, or everybody. And for warbands and orders and battle groups, JB built out this really cool permission system, and Christina picked that up and made it more modular, more flexible, and able to be applied to a whole cross-section of systems. And so now we can do really cool permissions things with anything that needs really cool permission things on them. So for any of you guys who are going to be running guilds or warbands or orders or any of that stuff, it's super exciting. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more to say on that, but it's cool.
It's kind of a behind the scenes, make things easier for us to do and use.
Scenarios and combat readability. Matt's been super busy this week helping out with several items. Daytime and ammo generation settings have been added to scenario defs. Tab targeted projectile prediction improvements. Projectiles such as arrows go towards your target immediately instead of like curving mid-trajectory. Client-side bindings for new ability buttons, and more info passed to the UI allows us to give more visual feedback for your abilities.
And you can just spill into the next one.
Yeah. Well, so like the first one, daytime and ammo generation, lets us set daytime and whether or not you're required to use ammo while you're participating in a scenario. Really nice quality of life stuff for us that sort of boils over into gameplay for you guys. Projectile.
And you won't get that, oh, I forgot to do this.
Exactly. It's just like we won't always forget to set daytime and stuff like that to whatever's appropriate for the test that we're doing or the demo that we're doing. Tab targeted projectile improvements is just basically we're making it, I believe, so that the way the client predicts where your projectile is going to go is more similar to the way it's actually going on the server. There's a little bit of a discrepancy there that made the projectiles look a little like wavy on the client, so that's getting better. It'll help you guys aim more and track targets better and all that jazz. And support for new ability buttons, which is our next line items. Number 4, AJ made some long strides this week in the first pass of the updated skill buttons.
They're really cool.
Yeah. Currently they support toggle, prepare, disruption, and recovery. Up next, with some help from Matt, we're getting cooldown, running, and queued. So, I'm not sure. I don't think this is the whole ability bar refactor we've been talking about for a while. You're not getting like all the dockable icons and stuff. That's really, really cool. We're not there yet, but all the new features that we've been adding to the ability system are finally getting represented in the UI.
Right. The dependencies for the bigger UI bar overhaul.
There's a whole bunch of them.
Are sitting behind, once we get into beta 1. Right now, this is taking some of that stuff, which was mainly based around how do we improve combat readability and letting players kind of really know what's going on, why am I getting...
I think we had to rearrange the bar too, right? I think that's in there. I kind of want to go ask, because that's like a big deal.
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but...
JB, send AJ over when you hear this.
Yeah, so... basically, it's a kind of a half step, but it's a really cool visual.
Or just answer in chat if we can rearrange the bar.
Go for it. NPCs.
NPCs.
So this was something I mentioned last week.
JB asked you to repeat the question.
With the ability bar stuff that AJ has been working on, can we rearrange your skill bar?
The buttons, you mean?
Yeah.
Each button.
Yeah. Currently in review from Colin, NPCs can spawn, move to an area, and defend it, returning if pulled too far from their defense point. We plan to use this with the next scenario discussed in last week's live stream. I think also not just a point, but we can say like this entity, like go and defend that guy.
Yeah.
So there's this concept of
That actually
like,
might be a better way to put it.
You can go to and defend like a plot, but it could also be used later on for like caravans of like, you know, guards caravans.
So we can, part of the discussion this morning was just clarifying that part of the goal for the entities was making one that was, hey, I took this point, spawn a few guys around it, they defend it within a localized space, and spawn some guys that then try and go and take the next point.
I didn't tell Colin, but I had this idea. I want to like see if we can set that up to follow around like a CSE person and just spawn like 20 guards to defend them and have like a little challenge
to defend one guy running around.
Yeah, see if we can have like a bunch of backers try and kill the CSE with
guys.
20 guards. Yeah. Yeah.
JB clarifies, no rearranging it yet.
Okay, that's why it's not on the list, but I was hoping, sorry. Battle groups and warbands. Past one of JB's work is currently in review, and AJ's UI work is close to review. Once these items get through the review process, we can begin some testing focused on the performance of truly large-scale battles we've shown with our arcs and backers. And so that's just, you know, getting lots and lots of people into battle groups and warbands, and having all that component of the game.
I don't know if you know about this one, JB.
Yeah, I was reading
one
about
this morning.
Yeah. Graphite client. After getting a bunch of the battle groups work into review, JB created a graphite client with basic query language for building requests. This can be used by our servers to pull metrics data from our graphite server. Excuse me. The first use will be for getting player count data and making it available to our web API server. This gets us real-time player count info to our patcher or to fan-made sites. Additionally, we can get historical data, in JB's words, for building some awesome graphs. Using this also makes more of our metrics readily and easily accessible in the same manner. So just, we're working on some endpoints for getting more data out to our APIs, and specifically like graphable data.
And one of the things was from one of Mark's requirements, it was number of players that are currently in and stuff like that.
So, you know, start working on your heuristics for what makes the best player, and you can aggregate that data and have a graph for how awesome you are. Artsy things, go.
Okay, deflect animations. Basically, Sandra's been working on updating the deflect animations. We had built a bunch, or made a bunch for different weapons. Basically, each one of your weapons has its own track that it runs a timer, and at that timer's point, a deflect comes up, so that if you get hit, your character will deflect and mitigate some of that damage. And now that they actually play an animation, we've been able to actually see what the timing is. Kind of, basically, this task is to make them look less like flinches, make them more, you know, upper arm, kind of tossing aside a weapon or something like that, and get them to be a bit quicker. There was a bit too much noise just kind of going on the character that made them a little bit confusing with attacks and flinches instead of deflects. So that's just an ongoing update to those things. So she's gone through, I think I actually listed which ones. Did the bows to start with, just to test the timing on that. Left arm shield, pole arm, greatsword, longsword deflects. Place of power, Dion started on that last week, just kind of with some fresh eyes, updating it. We want to put the place of power into the next scenario map. The scenario map is, I believe, a bit smaller than the place of power, so we're going to have to kind of make like a mini place of power in the middle, chop it up a little bit. Baby place of power. But that's all based on, I think, some of the run times that Ben wanted for the scenario, point to point. So one of the things I wanted to do a long time ago was...
Just be clear, like, there's this sense of the like, epic scale of the place of power that we want in the live game, and there's the sense of scale of the way the scenarios work, and so we sort of started with
Right.
how do we want this epic place of power to look in the live game. Now let's make one that's appropriate to the scale and timeline of a scenario.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was playing artist on it. I was like, well, it's not totally done. And I was hemming and hawing about it, and a bunch of
Get her done.
the West Coast guys were like, well, where is it? Let's see it. And so the minute everybody saw it was like, yeah, let's use that thing. So we're going to amalgamate it into a smaller version of itself. Part of that...
Then we can judge it on live.
Yeah, then we judge it. We'll judge it live. Part of the thing I wanted to do originally was kind of do like a wasteland look. So originally I had scoped this out as just a really rough pass using some of the assets we had, and then I was like, you know, we could probably come up with Dion's coming free, could help me out with some stuff. So we're gonna do like there's some pictures, some new photogrammetry scans of grass and some dead trees and
Such a cool word.
photogrammetry. Yeah. Grasses, dead trees. We'll do some rocks, and what we're going to do is use some of the assets, the hand-built rocks that are very, fantasy shaped with crystals and stuff on them. If you remember any of the Place of Power stuff, and we'll make little assets out of those and place those in the world around it.
Can you elaborate what the shape of a fantasy rock is?
Yeah, that's actually really easy. Basically, anything that seems to defy a little bit of gravity, honestly, is anything I think of like fantasy rocks. Things with like big curves in them, rocks generally look like masses, right? So like ours are like big spikes and shapes and stuff, like things you'd see around a really crazy lava flow. Fantasy.
Now you know.
Seriously.
Lava equals fantasy.
I dare any of you after this stream, go look up like forest, then look up fantasy forest, go look up rocks, then go look fantasy rocks. You get totally different search results. Okay.
Make sure safe search is on.
So Dion's been working through those things. We'll have some screenshots of those. She's doing a great job. The photogrammetry stuff typically is really high cost and isn't usually game ready, so there's a bit of just kind of toning down the texture usage and poly count of those things that is a bunch of the work, and we need to do a little bit more of that simply because we're trying to support 1,000 players running around. Armor variations. So one of the things that Michelle's been working on, if you checked her live stream from earlier this week, are taking some variations, creating concept art for different variations of the existing low poly armor sets. What that means is we're taking the low poly armor, in this case there's an image for the Arthurian chest piece, and she's basically creating a bunch of variations that we could do with a superficial high poly sculpt on top of it that would create a new normal map, and then we can create new materials for it. So the shape of the geometry will be the same, but the look of the actual armor will be different, and you will get some of that non-geometry normal variation. So things that might be flat can be chainmail, or things that can, didn't have embossing. That's a really easy example. It's just like, like that embossing that you see really fancy kind of designs or patterns on armor. We can make that update to the existing armor. Why are we making, everybody's doing this over there. What?
Oh, Mike was typing in chat, but he's not responding to me.
Okay.
Would you say that's how fantasy armor looks?
Yes. Honestly, look up armor, then look up fantasy armor. Like it's funny because if you look at all of like the reference images and stuff that Michelle and Sandra have pulled over the years, like a lot of it has all this really fancy gilding and embossing on the armor and stuff, and we can do all that stuff much faster. John's really fast. The programs we use for materials are really fast, and we don't have to reskin and rebuild all of the geometry from scratch, which is a really time-consuming process. The other thing is it lets us come up with some cool variations that actually lead to different crafter recipes. So maybe you could make a suit of armor with X number of assets, but then because you've done this embossing and it's gold, maybe you need gold in the recipe. So we can add some cool little variations in there that give players more variation and require less time out of us, which is important when we're a small studio. And John's going to be starting on those next week. VFX, so one of the things I wrote in here was sitting next to Mike is really fun. This morning when I came in, he had a guy, just our model standing in game, and he had lightning crackling around his arm, and I was like, that looks awesome. He's like, yeah, I'm filling in some gaps on the Mjolnir's VFX. I was like, cool, we're going to have, lightning VFX. Lightning bolts. So Mike's
no hammers yet. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, not yet. No throwing hammers yet. But Mike has been working on VFX, plugging in holes, specifically the Mjolnir, some of the crush and slash weapon trail effects, including hit impacts, and those just, right now, like I've said before, expect a lot of reuse or generics, and that's really just proving out the system. We have a ability XML refactor coming in from Ben, which is going to hopefully simplify everything for him in making abilities going forward, but it's also going to require a bit of like by DB and Mike will have to go through all their stuff and make sure that everything's still appropriately tagged and working. So it won't make a lot of sense to make all these very unique VFX yet until we kind of get farther along, we start feeling out how the classes are, and we start kind of focusing in on each class and making them different. Like right now, all the healers use kind of a turquoise-based, they throw a lot of turquoise around, a lot of generic stuff, and moving forward as we get the feel of the characters, we get testing in, we can spend more time on what do a stone healer's VFX look like so that you can tell which guy's the stone healer versus which guy's the physician. SFX, so DB created a first pass prototype of general combat ambiance that plays when there's a large amount of players in combat around you. This also involves working on new parameters that will affect the interactive combat music. Something he talked about a long time ago was to do different levels of combat music based on how much action was going on around you, with a bunch of fun ideas around, if your guys are dying on your side, does it change the music? If you're winning, if you're losing, a lot of fun stuff. And so one of those small things he was looking at was simplifying the number of sounds we're playing with just a general combat ambiance, and then picking some of the work that needs to be done around that is picking out prioritizing which sounds are going to be most important to you versus other people around you.
DB should totally sneak in like a sexy bass line for when there's a lot of action going on.
Yeah. That'd actually be good for like traveling music.
I don't know what you watch when you're traveling, but
it's what it made me think of. Like, it didn't make me think of combat. It made me think of like a guy like walking down the street. Okay.
Gotta work on our beatboxing.
No, we don't. No, we don't. Weapons, focus items. So one of the things we have talked about in the past, but we have not had in the game, are focuses. Focuses are basically something that can occupy a hand slot, the left-hand slot, and are mainly meant for like our caster types, and in this case, some of our healer types. We've made some focuses, but we never made the tomes. Not tombs, as I wrote earlier, the tomes. So if you check John's stream from earlier this week, he created 6, 2 for each realm, basically these books. We've gone at them the same way we've done with swords that are done in pieces that crafters could build independently and assemble later when we do this part of the tech.
Are focuses left-hand only?
Well, they're only left-hand only right now, I believe, primarily just for saving on animation time. Like, we'd have to recreate double the animations if they're in both hands. So the books, you can assemble them as like the whole jacket, and then there's like an accessory that you can put in the center, and then there's a border element. So the idea is that different people could be running around with not only different looking books, but differently assembled books of different materials. That's the goal we're leading to. So the art that we're doing now supports that. Along with that, I think I just followed it right up into the animation side. Scott,
it's like, why are there 2 focus items?
There's a work in progress animation in today's update where Scott was doing left-hand focus, right-hand empty casting. So one of the things is, since players can pick up all the different weapons, technically you can cast with all the different weapons. So right now we've kind of dialed that back just to get us into combat. So when you do our cast animations, your weapons disappear from your hand because you don't need to be holding a longsword when you do this. So one of the things we've started with is just the one-handed permutations. So if you are empty-handed and holding your focus, we put this on a marker, and the focus can move around and stuff in front of you, and that could be a book, that could be a gem, a stone. We have some concept art and modeling that we did a while ago and some other variations, and then you go woo, and this thing moves, and God, I'm gonna get a fucking gif of this soon. Woo! Every time I do it, it just ups
Whoever
the chances.
makes the gif, put a taco in there.
Woo!
Thank you.
So the character does casts, and it has like an area cast, and these are kind of work in progress as we fill out just a generic casting set. just like with all these things, I'd like to get into more specific permutations for different classes and stuff. But for right now, once we get these in, Ben's got a bunch of work ahead of him. But once he gets through all of that, then he can make the items for the focuses, give them stats, and we can try them out with some tags and see what they look like. That's about it. I'm trying to remember if I forgot anything. We do have the Q&A, and we've got this mystery box. Do you want to do the mystery box before the Q&A, or do we do it at, we do it at the end?
Always do it at the end.
Okay.
Yes, somebody sent us a box addressed to Max Loremaster.
Also,
I have
I'm
no
still
idea who
curious.
sent it.
I'm still curious who sent that wreath.
Oh yeah, somebody sent us a giant Christmas wreath, and we also don't know who sent it.
It smells amazing, but we have no idea who sent it.
All right, so
Do you just smell every
we're gonna
box
go
we
into
get?
Every time I watch
Q&A. So give us. We
It's
have
a box.
Tyler here, who's art guy, and we have Tim here, who's programmer guy. So give us your
I will
art
cut
or
you.
programming lesson.
I've been walking to the printer a lot this week, and it's right over there. I smell it. It's right next to the printer, so I smell it.
Vasil asks, has any more work been done to or with the depths? Might some of the depths be available in Beta 1?
No, the depths is not planned for the start of Beta 1. That's a during Beta, which we'll need, we'll figure out when. Oh, John's been doing some extracurricular depth stuff that he's kept to himself. He's been very excited.
We got Rule 34 depths happening over there?
You can't tell a ZBrush fiend that you're going to be doing some adult-themed monster, terrible-ish nightmare fuel thing and have him not work on it. Yeah, if you're ever here late, you'll see him late at night or on the weekend. He'll be in here working on something.
Helzek asks, with recent updates to combat readability, when will we see progress on combat functionality, i.e., attributes, banes, and boons affecting combat again?
They do.
I think we've got a pass scheduled on player stats doing a little bit more integration there. But a bunch of
And
stats do affect combat.
Performance, too, right, for stats?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were querying stats
Yeah.
like all the time.
So there's a little bit of a stat refactor coming to get a little bit more integration on them, get them a little bit closer to the design. But a bunch of stats do currently work. Agility makes you faster, and vitality makes you have more health, and endurance makes you have more stamina. And
one of them is
they're hooked up
Renegade's
to your weapons and stuff for requirements and.
Yeah, so right now, and also with the Banes and Boons, like we have a pass on Banes and Boons. There's more functionality we want to do with Banes and Boons. There's certain things we can't support.
The big
right
thing
now.
is we just haven't built out the list of Banes and Boons, but the system there is largely in place and functioning. And you'll start seeing that. I'm pretty sure we've got status icons for a bunch of the Banes and Boons.
So the status icons we put in based around combat readability, and I think last week they were only showing like one. It wasn't always working. I don't know what Rob did, but there was clearly some magic.
And then like the next day you had like 8 of them.
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch. And part of the reason for that is like your encumbrance is an effect that's always upon you because you are carrying something. So that was an easy one for Rob to just hook up and verify that the system works. Actually,
regardless of whether or not you're carrying anything, encumbrance is on you. You can be stark ass naked.
You start with it
Yeah,
in general.
yeah. You have encumbrance and it goes from like not encumbered to
so
hella encumbered.
a lot of these things work. So specifically to combat readability is just making sure that you can see that these things work and you understand why things are happening.
Pachamos asks, Tyler, what is the hardest part about producing a game?
The scope. There's a lot to do. Honestly, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of people kind of keeping it up to date and dealing with Tim and yeah, I mean, really, MMOs.
It's mostly me.
There's a lot of scope. There's a lot of asset stuff. There's a lot of people skills.
There's a lot. There is a lot of wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah. I mean, right now I switch between a lot of different hats, minute to minute sometimes.
Can someone point at his hat during this? Thank you. All right, visual pun. Odelvik asks, who in the office makes the loudest hand gestures when describing things? I vote for Tyler.
I was going to say, I was thinking of myself. The engineers aren't very hand-wavy.
We hand wave everything. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I'd have to say me. I mean, I love talking with Scott and Sandra because.
And then combat happens.
I remember with Sandra saying, like, you know, you need to get the motion like this and get the other one going like this, and I said, I know all I'm doing is this, and I said, do you understand what I mean? And she went, oh yeah, I gotcha. And I was like, great.
Odovik asked a question from Nanulak. When can we expect to see more toolbars, as it seems obvious to me there will be a need for more than what is currently available?
We have a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah, I think last time I checked, we supported somewhere between 20 and 24 abilities on your bar. But I don't know how that all came out after the skill bar rework. So it's in a little bit of a flux right now.
Like I've said, we have a bigger refactor and update that we want to do to the ability bar in general, but it requires a lot of extra work that we're putting off until we get into beta.
Yeah, there's also a bit of sort of quality of life. Like Tyler and I had a talk about this yesterday in terms of quality of life for how you compose your skills and how some of them could be made more modular, such that, you know, it's not a skill bar, but it's a category of things that you select that's sort of orthogonal to the skills you use, that will reduce the amount of clutter on your actual skill bar. So there's you can already have a crap ton of stuff on your bar, like 20 or more, and I guess it's not a huge amount, but it's also not a really small number. So anyways, that's in flux because of the stuff we've got going on right now. There's some work happening and some discussions happening behind the scenes about how we make that more intuitive without the need for more buttons on your bar. And then obviously, as we talked about earlier, there's a bigger skill bar overhaul that's happening later.
Yeah, doing it now would just delay beta.
Right, it would be work that we would have to do again once we did the overhaul.
Hey folks, remember to save your design questions for Mark or Ben. We have here an artist and a programmer, so
keep it simple.
Or programming questions, not design questions. So, Pachamos asks, Tim, how do you keep your hair looking so fresh?
Curious readers want to know.
I just started about a month or two ago riding a motorcycle, so most of the time I just have like helmet hair. There's no product there. This is just Tim's hair. I wake up this way.
Kick Assassins asks, how challenging is it to add different seasons to biomes? Things like falling snow or falling leaves. Will weather play a factor in encumbrance and a bonus to abilities and things like that?
Yeah, we do want to hook in different factors. I don't want to speak to specifics because I don't honestly remember, and that's more of a design question about what we want to do with it. We do want it to affect things like movement.
But how challenging is it to add different seasons?
It kind of depends on how far you want to go with it, and it depends on what things you're going to affect, and it depends on how many like new assets you're going to create. For creating new assets, that's pretty much the same as if you were to create
I couldn't
any
tell
other.
if you were going to go here. A wild designer has appeared.
Apparently.
What are you looking for?
Nothing in particular. I was just going, hey, this would have been useful.
Nothing in particular. I'm just wandering around.
Nothing in
picking up
particular,
chords.
just this specific thing.
that I could have used instead of buying the one I bought a few weeks ago.
I saw you run around with a cord the other day.
And I'm
yeah.
like, you know,
there's one over here.
There's one right over here that I was looking for. So I wouldn't have had to take it off my computer to go into the conference room, which I just had to put back.
What?
Because
It's an HDMI cable.
hey,
What are you
That
looking
wire
at me for?
actually
Producers can be
mysteriously
taught.
appeared. I don't know where it came from. It was just here on the table.
yeah, move over. I'll take some questions.
Scoot that ass over.
Yeah.
But let me.
We're talking about how challenging it's going to be to add seasons to gameplay.
Well, don't
And
you just?
weather.
Oh, that's easy. Don't you just charge for them?
Yeah. Yeah. No. Here we go.
Loot boxes.
The $4.99 for winter. But
Bitch, please, we can do better than that.
Hey, that's an idea because it gives the player a feeling of real accomplishment. You know, when they spend the money so they can
Four
play in
ninety.
winter.
Yeah, $4.99 for a loot box with a 5% chance of getting a season.
Well, it might have 5%. You can't talk about that.
But of one of 42 different seasons.
Well, we've got 6 moons.
Amber1 asks, are the CC systems far enough along to describe the extent and possible variations of roots, slows, fumbles, silences, etc.?
Well, we've already got some in, obviously, for those who've been in IT, and there are more coming in. I mean, one thing that I've said from the beginning about crowd control is that it's kind of important to our game. You know,
We're going to have crowds.
Yeah, well, not only would you have hopefully we'll have big crowds, but not only that is when you look at RVR games, if you look at something like Dark Age and other games, you have to have good crowd control systems.
Yeah.
The only thing we said from the beginning is that we're not tied to, and no pun intended, to the typical, oh, you must have a root, you must have snares. That there are other ways to do things. And, you know, we're hoping to do both. And we'll see what happens. If not, we can always fall back on the more accepted and more tropish stuff because we know it, you know, what works.
Would you say in a lot of games, not massive, crowd control is generally it's a clutch play for a small scale game, whereas we want our crowd control more to be a force equalizer rather than a force multiplier?
Correct. I would agree with that 100%. A nice Star Wars reference.
Helzik has a question that maybe you can all speak to, maybe not. Among the completion criteria on the key Beta 1 user story card, first pass working Vox Magus, and generic siege engine, they are not labeled as complete, despite a lot of work being put into these items months ago. What is currently holding these parts back?
That's a great question. Why isn't generic siege engine
Siege engine, we were waiting for something that we just put in. Oh, you wanted to get some of the animation stuff working on.
Right, but didn't it say first pass?
Yeah, we could mark it off now.
Yes.
There's a lot of times we have a lot of discussions exactly like this on the user stories of yeah, we've got a first pass in there, you know, and what exactly are the 6 criteria for what we consider first pass? And a lot of times there's one that's not really important to the specific testing of the system and getting it proofed out to you guys, that we'll get the 5 of the 6, and that last one just isn't super important for the development of the game. And then we'll come back and review the user stories periodically and be like, oh yeah, if we do a day of work to get this last little dinky thing out of the way, we can knock out the
because if you look at siege engines right now, especially with the animations, even though they're not perfect, you can actually now stand behind and move the siege engine.
Yeah, I actually brought this one specifically up a couple weeks ago, and just
someone was in here.
No, yeah, we were trying to.
Why the fuck weren't you here, Mark?
It was a conversation of should we check this off yet. The other one, the stat one of the things that's not checked off is encumbrance, or your stats mitigating encumbrance was one of the parts of checking off encumbrance. And one of the things I had mentioned was we should dovetail that into the stat refactor and make sure that one little last piece is in there so that we can check it off. I mean, one of the important things is we don't want to check things off too early, really. Just kind of making sure
we're trying to be honest about this stuff. Really, really hard. There was one for one of the items where we hadn't checked off one of the items things because we wanted shields to be able to block and deflect, and we had deflect and we technically had block, but we didn't want to check it off on a technicality. So there's this thread of dependencies again where there's this one little sort of side feature that isn't really blocking us moving the whole game forward, that is causing that one user story just to not be checked off.
And so we don't want to check something off that doesn't really fit the spirit of what we intended to begin with and kind of just skip it. Deflect is a good one. Now that we actually have the animations working, I think the only other thing is whether or not we hook up the block specific active ability and then call that done. That's what it was left at.
To their specific question, do you remember what the issues with the Vox were?
Yeah, I think I held up that one because I wanted...
Go ahead.
Well, you
yeah, I knew I saw this coming.
Right ahead.
I was thinking out loud.
Because we were looking at refactoring the Vox appearance itself, remember? I think that's why I held it up. because I wanted to give the guys a chance to take what we had and take it to another level, and then we were going to, I think that's what was the holdup was.
Yeah, I know there was also a bunch of work that Christina did, but that's mostly complete.
I thought I was about to say it, and I think the work that she's done gets us there.
Hey,
but
when we
I'm
get
not
to
sure.
user stories, we can
talk
we
about
can
it next
check
week.
some of this shit
Yeah,
off.
absolutely. Great question. Thank you. Who was that?
Thanks, Helzik.
Helzik, thank you.
Says, thanks a lot, guys. I'm using user stories as a meter for choosing my questions when I'm not more inspired, so these answers help me a lot. Odilvik asks, how many places of power are you aiming for in the launched game?
We haven't even gone down that path yet. The idea with places of power, as you know, are both for fun encounters and fun places to play and goals and things to get, but also as a way to help make the whole Zerg thing less appealing. So that is a very, very fluid thing. The more places of power we have and how they're constructed and where they are on the map is gonna be crucial to the not only the initial setup for the game, but for the game as the islands come together.
So it's probably going to be, that number will be a function of the size of the landmass, the expected player
Correct.
travel time, the geography. There's just a whole bunch about the topography, the scale, and all of that we can't answer that question until we've got the islands built.
Correct.
Lotaween has another question that may touch on multiple disciplines here. Lotaween asks, will Veilstorms be objects in the game that move in the world that you can set their effects to follow with that new point-following/guarding tech you're currently working on?
Oh, that's an interesting...
That's a great question. So, yes to the first, probably no to the second, is that, should a Veilstorm be a real thing? The answer is yes. They're not just supposed to be Deus Ex Machina here. They are actually supposed to be things that are created by the players because they're using too much power, or at times created by us. So they will certainly be real things in the world, and not just, hey, you woke up and it says there's a Veilstorm going on and you don't see anything different and bad things are happening all around you. So yes, we want them to be real things in the world. We want them to be things you can interact with, but going all the way with how much it's going to track and how much distance it will cover, and could it go from one side of the world to the other, which if you take your question and you keep going and running a little bit with it, the answer is probably no, but who knows, right?
Yeah, it'd be probably a lot of tech dependencies to move it between servers even.
Nah, that's easy. That's the easy part.
Okay, you heard it.
Well, because
we'll put that one in Mark's task queue.
Frankly, all you do is you're tracking an object as it moves between worlds, between servers, and then that object itself is what spawns all the effects and everything else.
Yeah.
So if you treat it essentially as a player or
It's
NPC
simple.
object, that part isn't all that hard.
Pachamos wants to know, what was the first game each of you were involved in making?
Involved, right? Depending on one's definition of involved, it would have been, what the heck did I call that game? I think it's on my wiki. It was a Timex Timex Sinclair game. I don't remember its name. It's been so long. On the other hand, the first commercial game that actually made any money would have been Galaxy. After that came my first Mud. Before then, I had made a bunch of small things for PC, not really PC, Apple's and the Timex Sinclair, but I don't remember, what the name of the first one I did. Didn't sell a single copy, so I guess that doesn't count.
Oddly, this made me think of trying to make a tabletop Aliens RPG when I was in high school. Then I found out someone actually did make
Say
one.
there's one of those.
Yeah, someone did make one, and I bought that.
Yeah.
But actual commercial game was Tiger Woods 2000 or 2001.
Newbie.
The first game I ever made that other people played and enjoyed was a MUD called Minions of Anime. Yeah. That was in high school. That was fun. And then the first commercial game was Kingdoms of Amalur.
And I made D&D campaigns and wrote for a monster and adventure for Pathfinder.
Nice.
Yeah.
Even newer newbie.
Exactly.
These young guys.
We're not all as crazy as you. We started later.
Yeah, crazy is a good way to put it.
Odilvic says, a question for Tim.
Oh, good. I'll sleep now.
What request from the designers has caused the programmers to just say no in unison?
That's a good question.
Yeah, actually,
I
it's
feel
a
like
really
we
good
just
question.
had one of those this week, but I can't remember what it
Something from
was.
Ben. It would have to be.
I was gonna say.
'Cause it wasn't me.
That
Because
had to be from Ben.
I've been head.
A lot of the sort of like unanimous no's come from things that are like a huge amount of flexibility that we would add to a system that would be for a feature that wouldn't get used very much in this game. And so, like, you know, we're building a system that allows us to build games, and the ability system is hugely flexible. And so sometimes it would be cool, like, we get a wouldn't it be cool if, and then we go, yeah, but let's make Camelot. And so that's probably, you know, let's worry about Camelot.
I do remember one time when we first started talking about the ECT stuff, and it wasn't really a unanimous no. It was an, oh God, no, don't let the artists have this. It was when we were talking about the ECTs, and I think Ben was talking about, you know, okay, well then I could place an entity in the world, and then I could say, you know, when you get near it, it does something. And I came running over, I was like, so I can have bees spawn out of every bush in the game when you get close to it? Or poisonous things? And Andrew was like, that's exactly what we don't want to do.
Emmer1, your question is a little long. I'm going to trim it down slightly.
Rude?
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, well, it also calls out specific other games. so I'm gonna
No,
skip
it's
that
fine.
part.
Go ahead.
Okay, Emmer1 says, a question for MJ. What is your take on this recent trend
Oh, God.
of games going through a long early access or beta phase while actually making cash shops active that go on for years?
Wait, do we have a soapbox?
Yeah. How do you feel about this?
Why has this trend
I can
become
text-
almost a norm now?
All right, well, it's been good.
Yeah, we'll come back later.
So, you know, look, as always, I have to tread very carefully because, unlike certain people we all know and either love or hate, I'm not big on calling out other developers. Happy to call out a publisher every so often, but not big on calling out other developers. Overall, what I have said publicly is that when you combine a very long early access and the cash shop and other monetary incentives that you are given for playing the game.
No Viagra?
No,
Yeah, that's true.
That was three phone calls from my daughter asking whether she could open up the advent calendar.
That's not a good combination. We've been very clear, and I think the best way to look at it is from our game's perspective. We've been very clear that we're not going to do anything like that. As you guys have seen, and there was a great article up on and post up on Massively, and regarding certain games and business models where people have had a bunch of feedback. And the key is what is the money being used for? Why are they doing it in this manner? Doing things in order to fund the development of the game, to finish it off, all that. I get that. And there is, at least in my mind, morally, there's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, if it looks like it's a cash grab, if it looks like finishing the game isn't the intent, and by the way, I am not referring to Star Citizen, just in case anyone thinks that's what I'm referring to, I am actually not. But if it looks like that's going on, yeah, I have a real problem with that. I don't think it's the right way to do things. In our case, we're not going to be doing that. We've been very clear that we're not going to be doing that. We continue to be very clear that we're not going to do it. We're not turning on subscriptions until the game goes live. We've said that before. If you look at our tiers, we're not trying to sell all sorts of things other than the tiers themselves, and those tiers are being used to fund development and not to fund, whatever. So, I'm not a big fan of the trend that I've seen. I'm certainly not a big fan of the kind of loot box nonsense we've seen recently. I do think in free-to-play games and even in some pay-to-play games, you can do it right. Unfortunately, too many companies have done it wrong. And so, hopefully that answers the question. I can guarantee you, absolutely guarantee you, we're not going to do... Did we lose it?
No, we're fine. It's just Windows wants me to update. I'm not going to do it right
now.
now.
We're not going to do that with Unchained. That's a promise I made during the Kickstarter, essentially. I'm making the promise now. That's not how we are going to do things. Not now, not ever. Not with this game. Makes no sense.
We do have a lot of internal talks about, look at this sketchy thing that this game is doing that's in early access or doing loot boxes, and, it seems like it's so simple for so many of these guys to just be a little bit less greedy, and have a really solid plan for a really solid game.
And I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that's probably the crux of it for me, is does it feel like greed or need? If it feels like need, then that's okay, as long as they're honest about it. Because if it's need and it's helping make the game, backers then have a choice. Do I want to help them make the game?
Right.
And, then whether you want to consider yourself a patron, you want to consider yourself a good guy, whether you want to consider yourself a sucker, that's all up to you. On the other hand, when it feels like it's greed, then I have a real problem with it. And, you won't see that from us. And it's one of the hallmarks of my career, and something I'm very proud of, that I left money on the table. We could have made more money off Dark Age of Camelot. Easy peasy. But we didn't. Same with Warhammer. There are things we could have done to make a whole bunch more money. Don't care. What we are trying to do is be a great game company that makes also great games, that treats people the way I want to be treated. And with the kind of respect I think we are all owed, especially those who are generous enough to donate for a game during its Kickstarter or early access stage. Can I get off my soapbox now?
Can you?
I don't know. I'm stuck. Somebody put glue on the seat.
5-minute warning?
Yeah, 5-minute warning.
5-minute warning. Speaking of Dark Age of Camelot, Rackhors says, just a quick thank you to MJ for making a game that lasted me through my childhood on into becoming an adult, and now making another game that my kids will be able to enjoy the same way.
Well, I hope they do. Dark Age was a great game, and as anyone who's heard me comment on it has always heard me say, it was made by a great team. Everyone there, every single member of Mythic Entertainment at that time contributed to the game. They all worked hard. They all sacrificed. When we got the money to make that game, it wasn't like, hey, Ferraris for everybody. It was, hey, we can pay our bills for 18 months. And nobody took anything, extra out of it. So, I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope certainly you and your kids enjoy what we're doing. But Dark Age of Camelot was an amazing game made by a really amazing team, one of whom fortunately still works for us, and that's obviously Mike Grossmeyer, and a team that I've always been grateful to for the work and appreciative of the work that they did, back then.
Rodolphus asks, historically, castles used wooden construction for all the interior floors and subdivisions. How much realism do you want game mechanics to force on players with regards to building their own castles? If they want to build interiors with stone, will they have to start with an arch and work their way up?
Great question. So that is something that actually we have talked about. I know certainly Ben cares about realism. It's something that, frankly, we're going to have to deal with because the whole stability thing.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're going to evolve over time. The thing that we do have already, obviously, is, well, I think it's obvious, they've seen it, different materials that have different weights, different, properties And so we're going to continue with that.
Yeah, we've got, right now we've got the sense of like compression forces, we've got shear forces that, accomplish stuff similar to arches. And so we've sort of built a simple simulation of some of the properties that affect architecture. It's not going to be identical. It's not going to be true to form. We want to reach this balance of allowing and empowering you guys to build cool and interesting structures that suit your gameplay style and don't bring our servers to their knees, so that everybody can have their own spin on these things. And so for us, it's about finding that balance of cool gameplay and performance systems.
And performance is so important. I mean, as you folks know, having building systems where there is no real physics being applied, where you can destroy stuff and the stuff underneath and the stuff on top still floats. Obviously, we don't want a system like that. And that comes at a technical cost and a performance cost. So we'll always, and this is one of the things we're going to be focused on certainly next year, focused on how to make it as efficient as possible so we can have what you've already seen in our tests. Lots of buildings with lots of blocks, all potentially being able to be destroyed, at the same time. And that's the challenge, at the same time.
All right, a couple different contenders here for last question.
Are there two? Or is
possibly.
it a couple three? Or is it four? It's
2 or 3, maybe.
It's almost 2018, man. Gotta go. Gotta get with it.
Okay. Well, I think maybe you might all have an answer to this one. Helzik asks, with map features such as islands and pops, or places of power, as Beta 1 features, are there any related plans or shareable ideas on making the changing world of CU an engaging and desirable place to explore, conquer, and forge?
Well, forge and conquer, yes. Explore, at the end of the day, what makes things exciting to explore tends to be, in most games, PvE. That you don't know what's around the next turn, and it could be this great waterfall, or it could be a lot of, NPCs who want to kill you. Without that, challenge of all NPCs always running around and quests and all that, the question of how much fun it is to explore as just the world itself is a little more questionable. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, instead of NPCs, we have other players. So, therefore, the challenge is, okay, I'm exploring this world, but if I'm in now the enemy territory, I can get my ass handed to me just as it would be in a PvE game. So that's a little bit different. But Forge, absolutely. No question about it. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So, would it be, again, as beautiful as some games? Well, you've seen what we've already been able to do. And I think we're going to be able to up the look of the game even more as we get closer and closer to launch.
Yeah, in PvE, you're only going to get, that surprise once or twice. Once you've seen it, you've seen it. But PvP, every time you go into that forest, you don't know what you're going to see.
Yeah, great point.
There's two aspects to my mind. One is, the first time you're out there exploring the world, it's going to be new, it's going to be fresh, it's going to be different. You're, as Mark said, you're going to come around and see, maybe a cool waterfall or maybe a cool valley, and especially the eye of the beholder that's going to see either like, this would be a really awesome place to put my guild village because it's going to look really cool, or I can see how we could put, some walls up here and a gate here and make this a really cool defensible area. I'm excited about the opportunities for players to do those sorts of things, and also as the game matures, the way that they're sort of going to change the face of the landscape, either through some of the moving island stuff we've talked about, or through some of the terrain changing because of who has control over it, or just through the structures they build, how someone who may be, a Viking that on day one explores really far into Arthurian territory and finds this empty valley, and then, manages to make it there 2, 3, 4, 6 months later and sees, a city with huge forests because it's been populated by the Tuatha or whatever, like, both of those, the surprise that may happen having seen it before and after.
Yeah, and then they gotta go burn it down.
Yeah.
Burn it down.
Yeah.
And then they get to destroy the beauty.
I was just here 24 hours ago, and now there's 10 guys in here chopping down trees and putting a fort in here.
All right. Well, shall we close it on that note?
They said there were a couple of questions.
Well, okay. I was just picking one.
Picky.
Let's see. Simvor asks, I wonder if you have a specific combat design or style, speed, time to kill, CC limitations, etc., and you're building systems for it, or are you focused on building all the fun modules you came up with and wanted in the game, and then you'll tune it after you see how the first pass product will feel like? I'm asking because I wonder how close the Beta 1 combat will be to the final product.
So both close and not close. The reason why the former is because we are trying to build out Beta 1 combat to be fun, just like we want the combat in the live game to be fun. Not close, because whatever we think we are doing right, the odds are we would have done some things wrong. And that's the whole point of a long beta process. We want you guys and gals in there. We want you playing with it. We want you testing it. While we do have a certain, we have certain goals in mind, and a lot of them are, well, we don't want to be like that, or we might want to be like this, where we don't want super action-y, bunny hopping mages sort of combat. On the other hand, we also don't want slow and boring. So, yeah.
Where is that going to be?
Where is that going to be? So we're going to constantly be, trying different things and seeing what works. Because, look, after doing a whole bunch of games, and as you folks know from seeing even more games than I've ever created, whatever the designers think, especially early on, tends to be wrong. And not necessarily hugely wrong, but still wrong at times. So we're going to go in, we're going to see what's fun, we're going to get feedback from you folks, and we'll make our decision then. And I think that's something that should give you all a lot of comfort, because we are not trying to be, we know everything kind of guy.
This is the design. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Sometimes the word design or vision can be used very badly by designers, where, the vision rules everything.
Right, it's a hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I said we were going to do this 6 months ago. Why do we need to change it?
Yeah, and so that's never been my approach. I think it's, the role of the, designer or the guy who's, or gal who's writing the vision document to set out what you think they think at the time are very good goals. And then see how things go during development. Because nobody, and not even Tyler, is right every time.
Close, though.
Yeah.
Close. Let's be fair, close.
And you have to be willing, and you guys, I know have heard me say this before, you have to be willing to make changes. You have to be willing to be flexible. You have to be willing to actually listen to your players. And that doesn't mean listening to the loudest or the most, threatening. It means listening to the community as a whole, whether it's, through surveys and metrics and just being in there and playing, and then make a game that they're going to enjoy.
Yeah.
I suspect there's also, we do this mix of which systems, which gameplay elements, which tech do we need to build now, because there's dependencies such that we can launch the game in a timely manner. And there's also...
Yeah, we're past that.
Which systems...
Come on, you got to be able to laugh at yourself a little.
Which gameplay elements do we need to build now because we think it's a high-risk system and we need to start iterating on it sooner rather than later. And so I suspect there are some decisions we've made that look arbitrary to you guys, where it's just been, okay, we know that there's this waterfall of dependencies behind it that we have to get ahead of, or it's a system that we're just not sure about, that we want to get as much mileage on as possible on it, so that we can either make it as fun as possible or rip it out before it's too late.
Exactly. Good. That's a great question to end on.
I think so. Was there anything else?
Just the box.
Oh, yes.
What's in the box?
The one addressed to Max.
Here, you move and you can...
No, go ahead. You go open it. You've been in the middle.
No, it's to him.
Oh, it's to Max.
Yeah,
Well, it says Max
Sorry.
Loremaster on it, so I don't
Sorry.
know whether it's mine or not, but we'll find out.
But I'll be
I
more than
assume-
happy to open up Max's gift.
I have
I
no
assume we've
idea.
What's
already
in Max's
thanked,
box?
Pizza
We did.
We
Our
did.
rich,
Thank
creepy
you
uncle.
to our rich, creepy uncle, the anonymous rich, creepy
I've
uncle.
got a good picture in the update.
Who sent us pizza.
Pizza related.
Don't do that. It makes me... Yeah.
What?
You don't like how I'm opening this box?
No, the sound when you're...
Oh,
thinking-
yeah, where it makes you shiver.
Just use your strength.
Oh,
It's
this
a
has
book.
got art from our game in it.
Look at those muscles.
Yeah.
Someone wanted you to have this special gift.
What is it? It's cool.
I don't know. It's really in there. It's really well
There you
secured. There we go. Oh, it's a Merry Christmas
Nice.
from Poxer. Poxer put their name on it, so
You get
it's
to
out
say,
there.
That's awesome.
Is it a print
Look
under
at
glass?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god.
It's got a Lucarpon.
This is really cool.
It's like a art.
Are they called seal?
I've never seen these. These are
I don't know what this
awesome.
is.
Huh.
Your
Box are
walls-
well done.
Yeah.
Really well done.
That's like a print of art from our game.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, we got to think about these as gifts too.
Merry Christmas from Poxer. I think this is really to all of us, even though it's addressed to me.
That's
But there
okay.
It is.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
That's really cool.
Wow, look at that.
I mean, that's a certain amount of awesome.
There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Well, with that, keep an eye out for our update email coming out that Tyler's probably going to write.
Yep, it's almost done.
And we will see you later.
That's so cool.
Which one am I clicking? Intro?
Yeah. And mute the mic.
Okay.
Oh, damn! Did you see what?
Yeah. I
you
was
see
waiting for
that?
you to notice
Oh
that.
my gosh, I did not
What-
see
what
that.
is it?
Oh, Poxer! Oh.
And close.
Well played.
I was waiting for you to notice that.
Oh my God!
Did you-
well
I did not
transition
see
us
that
out
at
of
all.
played.
No, I haven't.
Go ahead.
I can
Oh.
transition us out. I don't know if
Oh.
it's something you guys are going to share.
That is so clever.
It's an
Do you want
Does it-
Tyler to end
you
the
look-
stream?
it's an EA loot box with a dollar amount. Okay, got it.
Oh.
You muted, right?
No,
No,
I
that's
keep
what I
telling-
said.
it was
I
enclosed.
keep telling you I haven't closed.
That was awesome.
We're the best at streaming,
Yeah.
guys.
Okay.
See, isn't unscripted so much better than video productions where you spend thousands,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars? You get moments like this. That's so cool.
Oh,
So just to
wow.
be clear, Max, I have not closed this
Okay,
out
well, thank you. for
Tyler,
making
have you
that
closed
clear.
us out yet?
No, I
Yeah, have you
haven't
closed
yet.
this out yet?
See
Bye.
you later. Bye.
Fine, now you're
So
on mine. I
we're
know
back,
what you-
and the reason why we're back is there was a really cute card in here that we didn't see until after the stream.
You may want
So-
to give them like 20 seconds to get through commercials again.
Oh yeah, gee, So okay.
Just in case you're not getting commercial breaks, we're giving the folks who might just be joining us a chance to get through the commercial breaks.
Okay.
So just so you know, there was a card in there that we missed until after we turned off the stream that I wanted to turn the stream on because what Paxa said in this is really cute. So this is the card which says somebody wanted you to have this special gift, which is probably why when you first saw it, that's probably you thought that that's all that
I thought
was
that's
there.
all that was there.
On the other hand, this is what it says. And doth strange the cat, because I guess Poxer and
There's a cat on
there's
there.
a cat on it. I challenge all backers to also send a quirky, somewhat sloppy, nice, yet seasonally relevant CU gamed theme card or other piece of art ? To and then the address of the office. So we'll put this, even though I'm not sure what that is. Maybe that meant to go there, because I think that's the actual zip code.
Poke me on Discord.
Yeah.
That works.
So we'll post this Poxer on our today's update, because it's great. I think it's really cool that you ask people to potentially inundate us with sloppy
Gifts.
cards. Yeah, because that's just awesome. I love stuff like that. So, Poxer, well done for the creativity, because that's just awesome. And well done for the card. And well done for the challenge. So 3 for 3. Well friggin' done. Having said that again, as always, we thank you for your patience. We thank you all for your support. And we'll see you again next week, because I don't think there's anything else in the box. So I don't think we'll be coming back until then.
There'll be one extra stream. I found some.
Res the stream again. Res the stream.
Bye, guys and gals.
Bye.
Bye.